The road is long, but the time is short. The college football playoff rankings, the initial ones, just came out this week. There's a lot swirling out there in the world of college football, but the season keeps rolling along just like those Georgia Bulldogs do. We're going to talk about all that and much more in this week's edition of the How About That Dogs Cast. So I got to tell you, I've been saying it for a couple of weeks now, and when I started with the idea that Georgia was playing for their college football lives a few weeks back, I wasn't certain that it was going to be a drum I was going to beat every week. But as it's turned out, that is exactly what it is, because nothing has changed. Another week, another victory for Georgia, and still they find themselves right in the middle of the college football playoff. At this point, I don't think that's going to change the rest of the year. The more I say it, the more I really start to lean into that idea, and it feels really comfortable. And think back to the beginning of the season, before the season began, we sat here and I made a prediction that if Georgia was going to lose a game over the course of the year, I thought this week would be the game that they would lose. Man, none of us knew the long and winding road that was going to unfold way back then. At the time, I thought that, well, they were going to handle Alabama because, frankly, I just couldn't see them finding a way to lose to Alabama again. But then, somehow or another, Jalen Milroe invoked the essence of Michael Vick when he was at Virginia Tech and was simply faster and better than everybody else on the field there for a fleeting moment. About a quarter and a half. But that was enough to give Georgia their first loss of the year. So now they've sort of been on the back foot. We've seen performances that looked really good. We've seen performances that looked not good at all. We've seen performances that made them appear to be world beaters. Really all over the place. Jekyll and Hyde, up and down. But because of who and what they are, Georgia has managed to win all but one of those games. This week, it's Ole Miss. This week was the week that I thought, over the course of what looked to be an absolute grind inside the new SEC, Georgia somewhere was going to stub their toe. And this was the week that I thought that might happen, because think about where we've already been. We've already played on the road at Alabama, on the road at Texas. They've already had to go to the neutral site game and play a physical game against Florida. We all know how much everybody in a Georgia red and black hates the Florida Gators. It's always going to be a physical game. And I just ask myself, can they get up time after time after time and answer the bell? And I just frankly thought that they would lose somewhere, and I thought this would be the week. And Kirby was asked about that this week at the press conference. How do you get the team up every week? How do you keep them playing at the top of their abilities? And to his credit, he answered it pretty straightforwardly. And he said, well, it has nothing to do with this week, really, because we try to compartmentalize each week. We know that humility is a week away, and we treat each week as its own season. Another way to think about it is like a chapter in a book. This is this chapter. So he says that everything that they do the rest of the year when they're not in season, all the team building stuff, all the work in the weight room, all those sorts of things, the intangibles, the things I like to call the superstructure of this program, are what let these young men and coaches feel comfortable with the fact that it's just who they are. You're not going to be at Georgia unless you do things the way that they do it. And the way that they do it means that you are building for this all the time. So a short way to say all that is to just say that they can be confident in the fact that they are built for this, the grind of the season. Now at SEC Media Days, Kirby spent a lot of time talking about the long game. I mention it here a lot. And the overall trajectory of this team right now seems to be falling in line with what Kirby said. They're managing injuries. Everyone has them. They're trying to bring them back together. But on the whole, even though it hasn't always been like this steady line, there's been a lot of ups and downs and twists and turns. The trajectory overall is that Georgia is building. Now, the one thing that I don't know any of us could have seen coming was the struggles that we have seen at the quarterback position. Now, I am somebody who thinks that it's never just one person, but there's no way to look at what's been going on and not have some level of concern. There have been mistakes that have been made that just leave you scratching your head. Some of them, rightfully so, can be explained away. Others, even the most basic football fan can look at it and go, that's not what's supposed to happen. It's not supposed to look that way. And here we are, after all that, up on Ole Miss. And even though back at the beginning of the season, I predicted that Georgia was going to lose this game, I'm not so certain that I feel that way now. But we'll talk about that just a little bit more on the other side. Right now, what I want to do is take a look at the thing that I just mentioned. That would be the struggles that Carson Beck has been having of late throwing the football for the Georgia Bulldogs. Now, all the other things, the things that we can see and the things that we can't see. Kirby Smart tells us that Carson Beck is doing a really good job. He's running the team. He's handling everything that they put on his shoulders, making the right play calls, all those sorts of things. But it's the things we can see that have us alarmed as fans. Because like I said, some of it can be explained away. Some of the other mistakes that he's making, it's hard to get your head around how it happens. The bottom line is the young man's human. He's just like me and you, and he makes mistakes. The thing is, when he makes a mistake, everybody sees it. Everybody sees it, not only because he's the quarterback, but because he's the quarterback of the number 2 team, number 3 team, right? Now that the new college football playoff rankings are out, the number 3 team in the land. And he's the quarterback at the University of Georgia. And Georgia has won so much over the last few years that you just don't expect to see the kind of performances that we've been seeing from Carson Beck or from whoever is playing quarterback at the University of Georgia. Now, for me, this is not a question of whether or not Carson Beck is in any danger of being sat down or have happened to him what happened to Quinn Ewers. Let's get you out of the game. Let's let you look and see what's going on. I'm not saying that that's something that couldn't happen, that they wouldn't pull him out and say, you need a breather, you're seeing ghosts, because that's not what is happening, according to Kirby Smart. But they still might do that at some point. I just don't expect it. I don't think that's the way Kirby handles his quarterbacks. I don't think that's the way Coach Bobo wants to handle his quarterback. Frankly, I don't think it's warranted because he's not exhibiting the kind of issues that Ewers was exhibiting in that game against Texas or against Georgia. Carson's having an issue with his decision-making. There's no way around that. And a lot of that is born out of a lot of other things that we've mentioned here before. I've talked about in other videos. Football is a team game, and everybody has to do their job. There's no way around that fact. And Carson is number 1 right in front of that line. He's the guy that has to get the play started, decide where the ball goes, and then execute whatever's been called. Now, that's where everybody else has to get involved. And when he's making bad decisions, throwing the ball into triple coverage when you see that there's a dump down or something like that, it sounds trite and boring, but when Kirby says he has to take what he's being given, that's the truth. I can think of at least 2 plays in the Florida game. One of them was an interception where if he simply just checks the ball down, he picks up 5-8 yards and it's not an interception. Instead, he tries to throw it into a window where it shouldn't go. Turnover, drive killer, momentum killer. So I do not feel like I'm in a position that I am going to give up on Carson Beck. I have seen him do much, much more correctly, the right way, in a way that put him in the top 3-4 quarterbacks in the country last season. I've seen him play that way so much more than I've seen him make mistakes. I'm inclined to believe that what he's dealing with right now is not something that can't be overcome. It's just something that he's going to have to work through. I'm not the only person that feels that way.
What do you think of Carson Beck?
I think he was very talented, played great, played an amazing game against us a year ago. She's throwing some picks, but quarterbacks go through that. And, it's a good problem to have. To me, you have a highly talented quarterback like him that can make all the throws and, is throwing some picks. You just got to work through that part, and you got a great quarterback, versus some people around the country say, okay, well, they protect the ball, but the quarterback can't make the throws. So it's a good problem to have.
I would have to say I agree with Lane Kiffin. I mean, you can watch somebody and be frustrated. And make no mistake, I'm not saying that turning the football is okay. Turning it over is not okay. You have to protect it. There's nothing in the game of football that is more important than the football. But it's not like Carson doesn't know that. It's not like I haven't seen him perform at a high level and execute in a way that led many people to believe that he would be a first-round draft pick this year. Yes, he is struggling. No, I'm not apologizing for him. If Georgia is going to do anything that we all hope they can do, Carson Beck must play better. But the talk of benching him in favor of Gunnar Stockton, who, let me remind you, was sitting behind Brock Vandegrift as the third stringer for Georgia. And we all see how Brock's doing at Kentucky. The idea that you're going to bench Carson Beck with all the experience and games played that he has under his belt in favor of a young guy just because he's struggling right now, to me, that doesn't seem like a smart move. So no, I don't expect that to happen either. I expect Coach Kirby Smart, Coach Mike Bobo to ride with Carson Beck, and that's exactly what I intend to do. And when you listen to his teammates play or talk about him, they will tell you they have zero doubts in his capability. And I think they know, and they have said as much, that everybody has to do their job. And when those things don't happen, it looks like a mess. So the good news here is that there is an opportunity this week and every week moving forward for Carson to remind us of exactly who he is and what he has been, what he can be again. I'm all gas, no brakes, go Dogs all the time. And that's how I feel about it. We can be Bulldog fans, call a spade, and recognize that the young man's not playing well, and still understand that he is the best option, without a doubt, to lead this Georgia Bulldogs football team right now. Now, moving forward, as I said, the Georgia Bulldogs are in the college football playoff right now. And this week, all I've heard is how they're going to go to Mississippi. And more than likely, let's say 2 out of 3 opinions that I hear out there tell me that Georgia is going to lose this game. And most of them are letting me know that it is not even particularly going to be close. Now, I have not followed up with each and every one of these voices and asked them exactly why do you feel that way? Because say 5 weeks ago, when I saw people talking about Mississippi, the conversation was exactly flip-flopped, and they had Georgia winning by 3 touchdowns. So the voices, the chaos, the noise, all that stuff is really loud this week. And there's nothing wrong with that. Again, Carson Beck has not played well. Even though Georgia scored 30 points last week, again, against a defense that is big and physical and talented, even though that's happened, fans will be fans, and they will look at it and say, well, Florida's not any good. I would disagree. I'm not saying they're world beaters, but they are improving over the course of the season. And they're going to look at what Mississippi did just last week, which was have a really good week. right? When everything seemed to be firing for their team. And you seem to forget about the fact that Mississippi has had their own struggles this year. And you just look at the last 2 weeks and then people say, well, Mississippi's going to beat Georgia. I don't know how I feel about that. In fact, I think I'm pretty sure I'm going to change my prediction. We'll see. Now, the truth is, they do have to go face Jackson Dart. And last year, he was hyped as being, if he had won the game in Athens last year, he was going to become the most accomplished Rebels quarterback in the history of the school. That's what the people in and around the program were saying about Jackson Dart and his performance. Then, of course, he shows up. They take it on the chin. Georgia dominates the game in every way. And Jackson Dart, all of a sudden, all that shine is gone from Jackson. Now, this year, Mississippi's back. They've revamped their roster, which is something that Lane Kiffin said they would have to do when he walked off the field in Athens last year. And Mississippi has one of the top offenses in the country. So make no mistake that Georgia will be challenged this week when they go to Ole Miss. The thing is, even though way back then I said this would be the game Georgia would lose, it wasn't because I thought Mississippi was somehow going to be 38 points improved over what they were last year. And as I've watched Mississippi play this year, the games they've lost, I'm reminded of exactly why I said what I said earlier this year, which is I don't think they're 38 points improved. Actually, I don't think that they're like entirely that much different than they were last year. Yes, they have a few more pieces on the lines of scrimmage. Yes, they're still explosive on offense. Can the defense be better? And we've seen flashes where it is. But Mississippi, I still just felt like they couldn't line up and go toe-to-toe with Georgia and beat them. No, the reason I said that Georgia was going to lose to Mississippi was because of where the game fell in the schedule. Now that Georgia already has a loss, and they are already very aware that they are firmly in the college football playoff right now, and they understand the magnitude of this game, just like they understood the magnitude of the game against Texas, just like they understood the magnitude of the game against Florida, I expect Georgia to go to Ole Miss and defeat the Ole Miss Rebels, changing my prediction from the first part of the year. I think they know what's on the line. If I needed to reach out there and say, well, there's something else that I want to bring into this conversation about why that would happen, I would have to say it's not like Lane Kiffin can't do it, but to this point, every time the money's on the table for Lane, every time there's a big game, he and his team seem to come up short. That's just the simple reality of it. And when I look at this game moving into Saturday, and I start to assess the teams for exactly what they are, I look at Lane Kiffin and I look at the Georgia coaching staff versus the Ole Miss coaching staff, and I'm like, edge Georgia. When I look at the defense for Georgia against the offense from Mississippi, yes, I know Mississippi's put up big numbers this year, but I've also seen that Georgia defense be able to shut down other high-flying offenses, and not only shut them down, but completely dismantle them. In my mind, this is still advantage Georgia. When I look at the Ole Miss defense and I look at what Georgia has the capability to do on offense, and I think about the fact that, yes, this Ole Miss defense is improved, I still, at best, am going to say slight advantage Georgia. At best for Mississippi, I'm going to say slight advantage Georgia. The one thing, and it is the conversation that everyone's having this week, is that it all depends on how well Georgia plays, as it is every week. You may have seen I did a video a couple of weeks ago following the Texas game because I wanted to shine a light on the words that Chris Marlar said. And you may know that name. He's somebody who's done work with Saturday Down South. He's done some work with the Locked On Network. And Chris absolutely nailed what was going to happen at Texas. He told everybody before the game exactly what was going to happen. And I wanted to put a spotlight on that, and I made a little video and shared it with Chris, and put it out there for everybody to enjoy. Because I felt like somebody who gets it that right, and me being a Georgia Bulldogs fan, we were in a bye week, we were still celebrating. I felt like, yeah, I've got time. Let's show this to people. The thing that I took away from that was a point that Chris made that is not one that's going to be lost on any of us. And that is that over the last few years, Georgia's had only one problem. And discussing exactly why they've had an issue with Alabama, that's for a different date. The fact is they have had an issue with Alabama. But everybody else, not so much. Georgia is the team that beats Georgia, unless the other team is Alabama. And even against Alabama, Georgia does a lot to help those results end up the way they are. But when Georgia plays other teams, the Floridas of the world, the Mississippi States of the world, the Texas of the world, they don't beat themselves. We saw the struggles that Carson had against Texas, and that roster and that team, because it is a team sport, refused to let that happen. They overcame, and they still got the victory. If you boil it all down, that's what this whole this whole game is about for me. This game against Ole Miss. Now, cards on the table, I expect Carson Beck to play much better this week. I expect Carson Beck to have a good day against the Ole Miss Rebels. But even if he makes a mistake, he is human after all. The ball bounces funny ways. If there's a turnover or two, I still think that Georgia, the team, is better than Ole Miss, the team. And I expect Georgia to go in and get that win. So there you have it. I think that's the first time this season that I have officially flopped one of my preseason predictions for what's going to happen in a regular season matchup. I had said earlier that Mississippi would beat Georgia. I don't feel that way now. I see Georgia goes to Oxford and they beat the Ole Miss Rebels. And they continue to survive in the college football playoff that they already find themselves in. That's simply how I see it. Will it be challenging? Yes. Can Ole Miss hurt Georgia? Yes. But this idea that Georgia's going to go to Ole Miss and somehow just, and this is the part I don't understand, that they're going to lose by 14 to 21 points all of a sudden. I don't know where that's coming from or why people are saying that. Not everybody's saying that, but I've seen enough of it to make it stick in my brain. I just can't agree. I just don't see it happening that way. And I'm certainly going to be cheering the Dogs on in hopes that I'm correct. Now, in the title, one of the things I mentioned was that what does Georgia need to do now to be able to win out? If Georgia is going to survive the rest of this college football playoff that they find themselves in the current moment, what do they have to do to win out, finish 11-1, and secure, without a doubt, their spot in the college football playoff and potentially an opportunity to win an SEC championship? I think it comes down to just a handful of things, and it's not rocket science. I'm not keeping any secrets over here, but it's the thing that people just seem to lose track of. They lose the focus about what football is all about. I'm going to start at the most boring part of it, probably, and that is that Georgia needs that coaching staff, their head coach and all the assistants and everyone associated with the program to do their job. They need Kirby Smart to be the motivator that he is just waking up every day. They need that team and unit to grind in a way to make the players the most prepared they can possibly be to undertake the challenges that lie ahead. Because make no mistake, this is still one of the toughest finishing stretches in all of college football. Our Dogs were lucky that they get to play all of these games. And the way they have to fall, like on the road with these matchups against these teams and where they fall in the season, it makes for a hard hill to climb right here at the finish. So Kirby and that coaching staff have to do what they do. Kirby Smart has to remind us why he is the highest paid coach in college football. People talk about pressure being on Beck or on the Dawgs or whoever. Kirby doesn't view it as pressure, but he understands that when you have that title as the highest paid and everybody in college football is looking at you and saying, okay, Georgia is the standard of college football programs in the country right now. That's a fact. If you're going to wear that crown, well, there's a lot of weight and responsibility that comes with that. And the thing that is first and foremost is getting your team prepared and ready to take the field each and every week. So Kirby's got to earn his money the rest of the way. That's the first thing that has to happen. I think he will, but I didn't think we could skate right past it and just not mention it, because that is something that is going to happen if Georgia's going to do this thing. Now, here's the one that everybody's going to say, like, well, duh, Randy, but they have to play clean. And I don't just mean Carson Beck. When I say Georgia has to play clean, they have to be able to do the things that are hallmarks of a Georgia Bulldogs football team under Kirby Smart. And it goes back to that culture and superstructure that I mentioned earlier. Georgia cannot be a team the rest of the way that is racking up penalties every game. And I don't mean a penalty here or there. I mean when you're getting, 9, 10 penalties a game or more, like some teams do. If you're doing that, that means you're an undisciplined football team. That means you lack focus. That means that you are ill-prepared. Georgia should not be any of those things, because that's not a hallmark of this program. When you think of Georgia, you think of them as being a team that has a relatively low penalty count per game, which is something they have improved on as the season has moved along and younger players get their feet under them a little bit better. Turnovers clearly are a big part of this discussion. So at this point, yes, you have to mention Carson Beck. And I think that as we move forward, he is going to have to play better. I said that earlier. But Georgia can't do the other things. Think back, just a handful of weeks. Think back to when they were playing Kentucky or say 4 weeks ago. The thing that seemed to be happening to Georgia, and they were being very lucky in the moment, was they were fumbling the ball seemingly a lot, at least a lot more than we were used to. But it happened to be bouncing their way. They weren't turning it over, but they were putting it on the ground. That's something that we have seen less and less of as the season has moved along as well, which shows you that it's a point of emphasis and it's something that they practice and they understand how important it is every Saturday that you don't give the football away. You don't give possessions away. And then we see Carson enter his window of struggle here. The thing about Carson Beck is that he doesn't have to be a first-round draft pick. He doesn't have to be that guy who some people said was going to chase the Heisman Trophy. What he has to do is protect the football, get the Dogs into the right play, and then work with his teammates to execute those plays to the best of their ability. Given the talent level on the Georgia roster, if Georgia simply does that, don't force the ball, take the check down, hold on to the football, don't turn it over in the run game, don't beat yourself with penalties, silly mistakes. If Georgia does that, and you pair it with the roster the talent that's on the roster, Georgia should be able to defeat everybody that's on their schedule the rest of the way. They're going to be favored in every one of those games. If Georgia simply plays clean football, they will go a long way in ensuring that they finish this season 11-1. Now, I'm not somebody who's going to harp on play calling or anything like that. I've said a lot about that in the past, and I hope you understand why I might feel that way. But what I will say is that it just feels, and it could be by design, or maybe it's not, that Georgia should run the football more. They need to show us that when they have to get it done, that someone other than Carson Beck can make a play when the game is on the line to maintain possession, maintain the football, and secure a win at the end of the game. That, to me, screams an opportunity for the run game to step up and be how you do it. Now, time and time again this year, and this is just another point on Carson Beck and how much the team, the players, the coaches, everyone trusts him. When Georgia has absolutely had to have it, the ball was in Carson Beck's hands, and they asked him to make a play. And time after time, Carson Beck has done it. He did it at Texas. He did it at Florida. He did it at Kentucky. Time and again. So, again, when everybody's raining down all the complaints and issues about Carson Beck, I'm not going to sit over here and ignore all those good things he did. But of the same mind, I'm somebody who thinks that Georgia needs to be able to turn around and hand the ball off 20, 25 times a game, not to one player necessarily, and have it be a productive play for them. That, in turn, will not only take pressure off of Carson over the course of the game, keeping you out of third and long or challenging situations, but it will also give everyone the comfort of knowing that if we have to line up and get a yard in the fourth quarter on third down or fourth down to maintain possession, that the Dogs can line up and get a yard with some play other than a jet sweep or a quarterback sneak. This team should be able to show us that they can do that. And oh, by the way, there is that sort of, let's throw it in there, fact that if Georgia is efficient in the run game, if they move bodies and pick up first downs and move the chains via the run game, that is only going to make that defense that we all know and love that much better because it takes pressure off of that defense. It gives them a chance to catch their breath. It shortens the opportunities that the other offense has, so that when they do come out on the field and our defense has to line up and play, maybe that other offense is the one that's feeling the pressure because they know that if they don't execute on this possession, they're not going to get that many more. So, to my mind, Georgia needs to improve their efficiency in the run game. Again, I'm not saying they got to run it 40 times. I'm saying when you do run it, do it effectively. Make it count. And this is a situation where this is just personal preference. I get the RPO game. I understand that throwing the ball out to a wide out and picking up an easy 5 yards because the DB is off of him. I understand that that's an extension of the run game. Totally get it. And it has its time and place. But there are times when you need to be able to line up, move the people along the lines of scrimmage, create a hole, and get the ball down the field via the rush game. And I want to see Georgia do that better. Again, I know the game runs through Carson Beck's hands. He's the guy. That's who they're going to put the pressure on in the moment that it matters most. I completely understand. But man, I'd feel better if I could see us start knocking out a few consistently 150-yard rushing games. I would feel a lot better about that. So the final key to the Dogs winning out over the rest of the season, for me, is simple. That defense that showed exactly who they are when they played against Texas, make sure that defense travels with us every week. Make sure that defense shows up. Take the lessons you learned, the proof of concept that you put on display for the nation against Texas. Take that and then make sure that it shows up every week. If it does, then I think that Georgia is going to be just fine because, again, this is a complementary game. There are 3 phases in the game of football: offense, defense, special teams. I'm really not that concerned about the special teams unit. They've been solid all year. The offense, I've already laid out what I feel needs to happen, needs to be done on that side of the football. With the defense, just continue to have good eyes, do your job, and let your talent take over. That coaching staff that I talked about a moment ago, continue to scheme it up. Give your guys the best opportunity to get after the opponent. Create some havoc. maybe force a turnover or two, steal a possession that way. If the Dogs do that, then Georgia's going to be just fine. Those are the things I think they have to do. The coaching staff has to remind us all of exactly who and what they are, which is one of, if not the best, coaching staffs in the country. Show us week after week. We're greedy for it as fans. We want to see the Texas performance every week on the defensive side of the football. We want to see the Mississippi State performance every week on the offensive side of the football. We are greedy for it. Give it to us. Do that part. Then let's make sure that the offense plays clean, that the defense plays clean, that we're not committing stupid penalties, that you're not turning the football over. Pair that with good coaching, just the basics of the game, the blocking and tackling of playing football, and you're going to put yourselves way out in front of the game. Run the football. I'm not asking you to become 40 carries a game Herschel Walker. I'm asking you to give me 20 efficient and productive plays in the run game each and every week. And I want you to roll the backs in. I'm fine with that. I love to see it. You've got them, use them. Coaching. Clean play. Power football. And then bring that nasty defense every week. Those four things, if the Dogs do that, and it may not be sexy all the time, but if they show up and do those things over each of the next 4 games, the Georgia Bulldogs will finish the season 11-1. Now, along the way, there are things we can do to help, like when they get back home and they have to play Tennessee, that Sanford Stadium is going to be live and jumping, that it's going to be a home field advantage. There are things the fans can do. If we are going to ask the team to do all that they're doing, to show up and perform at this level that we all want them to perform at, the very least that we can do is show up when they're back home and playing between the hedges and make Sanford Stadium a home field advantage that we all believe and know that it can be. To me, that sounds like a pretty good recipe for success the rest of the way. Until next time, take care of yourselves, take care of your friends, take care of your families, take care of each other. And go Dogs!
Told them, how about them fucking dogs? That's what I told them.